Good morning, devotees. That wasn't a switcheroo. I'm not giving class. Mukunda Prabhu is giving class. So the verse today is 4:28:12, right? Please take it away.
Thank you, Savatma Prabhu. Haribol, dear devotees. I'm actually here at Gita Nagari. It's very, very nice here. And I'm really grateful to all of you who are doing your service here. Before I start, I just wanted to recite this one verse that Hari Parsad, the resident, not resident, but ISKCON's kind of one of the foremost Sanskrit scholars that we have. He just wrote a little something and then he composed a verse in Sanskrit, which I would just like to repeat because it helps me. He writes, often when we are asked to perform the service of speaking some Hari Katha, and we may be a bit hesitant due to not knowing who is watching us in the audience, with what intentions. In such a situation, it is natural for the mind to feel some anxiety. Here is a recently composed verse that I, Hari Parsad Das, have been reciting regularly at the beginning of a talk. The verse instructs the mind to give up fear and speak confidently in the service of Hari, Guru, and Vaishnava. There may be many listeners in the audience who sit with various intentions, but we desire the service of the saintly, like-minded listeners. And the translation of his Sanskrit verse is, having remembered the complete force of the mercy of Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, the two Bhattas, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Sri Jiva Prabhu, Sri Gurudev, and all the followers of Sri Gauranga, and eagerly desiring the service of the saintly listeners. O mind, give up all fear at the beginning of the talk, for such fear is an obstacle to the speaking of Harikatha. Okay, yes, so we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 4:28-12. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tasyam Sandayayamayanam Sapora Saparichita Pada Kautumbabika Katumbinya Upatay Tapyata Sanvayaha. Tasyam Sandayamayanam Sapora Saparichpada Kautumbika Katumbinya Upatapyata Sanvayaha. Tasyam Sandayamayanam Sapora Saparichpada Kautumbika Katumbinya Upatapyata Sanvayaha. So the translation is, when the city was set ablaze, all the citizens and servants of the king, as well as all family members, sons, grandsons, wives, and other relatives, were within the fire. King Paranjan thus became very unhappy. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. There are many parts of the body, the senses, the limbs, the skin, the muscles, blood, marrow, etc. And all of these are considered here figuratively as sons, grandsons, citizens, and dependents. When the body is attacked by the Vishnu Jivara, the fiery condition becomes so acute that sometimes one remains in a coma. This means that the body is in such severe pain that one becomes unconscious and cannot feel the miseries taking place within the body. Indeed, the living entity becomes so helpless at the time of death that although unwilling, he is forced to give up the body and enter another. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that man may, by scientific advancement, improve the temporary living condition, but that he cannot avoid the pangs of birth, old age, death, and disease. These are under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the agency of material nature. A foolish person cannot understand this simple fact. Now people are very busy trying to find petroleum in the midst of the ocean. They are very anxious to make provisions for the future petroleum supply, but they do not make any attempts to ameliorate the conditions of birth, old age, death, and disease. Thus, a person in ignorance, not knowing anything about his life, is certainly defeated in all activities. Okay. So somehow or other, we are here listening to Srimad Bhagavatam class in the morning, and at this stage of our life, it seems that we are serious about our Krishna consciousness, because it's not a light thing actually to wake up in the morning and listen to scripture. But somehow you listening here live and those who might listen later on YouTube or wherever, all around the world, there are these people that are doing this, and it's really indicative of where somebody's consciousness is at. So I just wanted to highlight that this practice of listening to Bhagavatam is a very, very powerful practice, and you are all doing that, and it is showing where you're at. And I think it's important to sometimes we become very familiar with what we're doing and how we're doing it, but to actually realize just how valuable this is, and also this is the kind of life that you're choosing to live. So well done on that. when one speaks to an audience, it's difficult to know who you're actually speaking to. There's various levels of people out there. And I just wanted to talk about the levels of people that can be listening or that even can be speaking. And just to speak a little bit about that and then relate those audiences to how they might perceive the verse. So we know that, you know, there's Kanista and Madhyam and Uttama. So we can also look at it in another way. We either are new, which means we're enthusiastic and untested, actually untested in our devotion because we're new. We haven't had a lot of time for this devotion and to be tested. Or we're in the middle, which means we've spent some time here and we're going through the motions of this activity. Or we're mature, which means a spiritual life is kind of naturally absorbed into our life now. And so with the newer spiritual aspirant, which a lot of us are, we need to be aware that we are prone to misunderstandings and fanaticism. Obviously, we're new. We don't know the full gamut of everything. There is the one story that Srila Prabhupada used to tell about how the apprentice to the doctor was called out with the doctor. There was a case, this camel had a very swollen neck. And the doctor went out with the apprentice and the doctor felt the camel's neck. And then he asked the apprentice for the hammer. And then he took the hammer and he swung the hammer at the camel's neck and hit it really, really hard. And then, but the camel was cured of the ailment shortly thereafter. Sometime later, the apprentice left the apprenticeship of the doctor and wanted to break out on his own. And then the doctor heard later that this apprentice was going around hitting a hammer at the neck of all of these patients, these animals. He was a veterinarian, and he was killing them. So he went to the apprentice and asked, "What are you doing? Why are you doing?" He says, "Oh no, I saw you do this. I know how to do this now." And the veterinarian, you know, chastised him and says, "You're a fool." This, that camel, you know, he said, "I saw you doing it with the camel, so now I'm going to do it." He said, "Well, that camel had swallowed a watermelon, and I was just breaking the watermelon so it could pass through." So we are like that in our new thing. We don't know. We know a small bit of a very potent philosophy, and but we don't know the whole thing. But because of our lack of humility, we think that we do, or we think that, oh, I know this very important thing, and I'm going to now go and show everyone else what I know. And this can be dangerous. And I think we need to be aware of that, because there's a lot to know in spiritual life. There really is a lot to know. It's vast. We are very, very limited in our capacity to understand. So it's important to move with a little humility when we are new. I mean, I've seen so many times just things that I thought I was very sure were actually turned out to be quite wrong. And in retrospect, when I see how sure I was about those things, I'm a little embarrassed. So we need to understand we're prone to this kind of misunderstandings and fanaticism. And our faith is also untested. So in the beginning, you can hear the deep conviction of young people, but it doesn't ring that true because it hasn't really been tested that much. And often when it is tested, sometimes it's shown to be very, very weak, the faith, and people can leave. So humility when we're in this new condition is very important, because we really are prone to some quite horrific mistakes. And pride for the new person is the danger. So humility and pride, we can see they're the opposite sides. And we need to try and remain humble. It's a very safe position, and it's also a very appropriate position because we really don't know. Also, when we knew, we should be happy because we've made a good life decision to come to try and understand spiritual life. So we should be enthusiastic, but just with a little bit of humility. Then in the middle, we go through the motions of spiritual life and the practices, and the mercy that we had in the beginning seems to wear off, and we are often left in a kind of a limbo, and we realize our faith has been tested a little bit. We've fallen a little short. We've seen, oh, this is not a light thing to take to this process, and it requires some real sincere work on ourselves. And the taste seems to be diminishing actually a little bit, and it's a cause of concern. And this period can go on for actually many years and many, many decades. And we're wondering what's happening here. We're in a little bit of this long desert, and it can be concerning because there's not much taste. So what happens a lot is people try and become more determined. They try and chant more. They perform more austerities, and they really, really push themselves, with determination and some iron will to try and push through this phase. But still, something is missing, and they realize at some stage, oh, I can't keep pushing like this with this kind of determination. It's just too much. And they look and they realize, maybe I've just wasted the last 10, 20 years of my life because I'm not actually that happy. And then sometimes people just leave and they become a little bitter because they feel they wasted and maybe they were misled in what was available to them. Or the people stay in this uneasy limbo, and it's just uneasy, and they're not settled properly, and it can go on also for a long time. So that's in the middle ground. It can be like that a little bit. And then you get the mature devotee who gets through, who's in the middle phase, and they realize, oh, I'm hopeless and helpless, and I cannot actually do anything on my own. And this, that I need Krishna's mercy to do anything. I actually feel like a bit of I'm a child. And that is very, very good. But it's also, and it's true, and it's enlightening. One feels quite vulnerable in that state. But the mature devotee who goes through that middle section, or is getting through the middle section to the mature section, comes to that realization that I cannot do anything and I'm helpless, and I really, really, really need Krishna. So what that mature person does is that they go, Krishna, okay, I'm yours. I don't know how to do anything, but I have faith that you have got me, and you will protect me, and you will care for me, because I'm like a child. And in that constitutionally appropriate dependence, because that is our natural state, a very real sweetness starts to develop. And these devotees feel very safe and very loved and very nourished. And they mature, and they know how to deal with the new people and the medium people and with themselves and the whole world, because they're in the right mood. And everything becomes much easier, much, much easier, because you're not fighting against the tide of being something that you're not. So generally, those are the three kind. I've used a little different language, and we have heard this many times before, but it helps to understand a little bit where we're at and where these phases are. So in terms of the verse that we've just read, it talks about the horrific miseries of this world, and it talks about death and the pain of attachments. And these are very very heavy things, the material world is no picnic. So for the new person hearing a little bit about this, they are normally young. And when you're young, you think you're bulletproof. You really haven't, not only is your faith hasn't been tested, your body's still strong. Your digestion's still strong. You can still sleep anywhere uninterrupted. And they just, it doesn't really resonate so much, the concept of death or suffering so much. They haven't, been fired or got a divorce or had really bad health turns, or we all know the varieties of suffering that can come upon us. And they also think, oh, Krishna will save me. He said so. But it's not so cheap. It's the right mood. It's funny that the new and the last, there's very similar moods in some ways. And one of this is there's an automatic assumption when you knew, oh, Krishna's got this, he'll save me. But which is true to a degree, but that Krishna's it's not automatic, and Krishna has a way of saving us that he pulls out some love and some attachment to him. So it's not as cheap as we say, like that Krishna will just save me. And the new person is often, when it does happen, something does happen, they're shocked by the ferocity of suffering in this world. It's really shocking. Like the first reversals that you actually have, particularly if you've taken to a spiritual process and you've got this huge dose, this huge overflow of mercy, and there's a lot of ecstasy in that, and you just imagine, oh, this is what it's like all the time. Everybody should do this. Come on, the whole world, join the Hare Krishnas or whatever your spiritual path is. There's just a lot here. And so when the first test comes, or the first reversal, the new devotee is pretty shocked, and it's a real test of their faith, because even for devotees who come, there can be some real suffering. For everybody in the world, there's some real suffering. So when we hear this verse, I want for the newer devotees, we should understand that don't expect a smooth ride. This is actually a process of purification, and that purifying is not always easy. Yes, there's more happiness than we will find anywhere else. I'm personally convinced of that, and most people who've taken to the practice for some years are convinced of that too. But that doesn't mean it's going to be a smooth ride. It doesn't mean there isn't going to be suffering. Spiritual life is difficult, but we do know without a doubt the material world is near impossible. So we should crucially manage your expectations of what you're going to think you're going to get here. And part of that is just developing some maturity, that we're very, very conditioned. There's a lot of unconditioning that has to happen. That unconditioning can be a little painful. If the doctor cuts out the tumor, the cutting out and the operation is painful, but the result afterwards, you're tumor free. And so the results are much, much better. But please manage your expectations. Do not think that this will be, you'll be able to move through this world without any suffering or difficulty just because you've taken to a spiritual path. So managing it is important. When we hear a verse like this, do not think this won't happen to you. Death will come to you, suffering will come to you. And it's important to manage your expectations, otherwise you'll be very, very thrown by what the world has to offer. And again, humility is here for all of these phases, but particularly in the opening the new phase, one gets quite confident very quickly, and that confidence can lead to pride. We are not Superman or Superwoman, and we will show that. I went through a large period of Saturn, Shani. It's a malefic planet. It's not very good. And I realized at some stage, because I have a very controlling nature, and I try to but when you put it this way, I realized I couldn't take on this huge planet, which is in one sense is ridiculous to even think that you can. So we are infinitesimal by nature, and there's a lot of powerful forces out there that we are going to be at the mercy of, good and bad. So humility is important. Otherwise, you might break some things by trying to control them too much. Yeah. So then in the middle, as a madhyam, or we've been doing this practicing for some times, when we hear this verse, we go, oh yes, I know. Because these constant miseries of the material world, they have worn us down. Poor health can, over time, you come to a certain phase that, these bad habits that we've in our diet, for example, they start to catch up with you. And it becomes difficult. People get sick regularly. Their energy levels are really low. And they can't sleep properly. So in the middle person, they're worn down. When they hear this verse, they're very aware of this, and they've actually been worn down by these miseries. As a devotee, we are also subject to them, and we're worn down by these miseries, and we have poor health, we have poor relationships, we haven't cared or taken care of some things we should have taken care of, and they're now starting to manifest these things that we've repressed or whatever in our marriages or whatever. They're, like the same thing with the marriage, the honeymoon phase is worn off, and now we're in like the long slog of marriage and dealing with not only our own stuff but our partner's stuff. And so we have these poor health, we have poor relationships, these miseries are just always around, and we're looking at the world and we're looking at our Krishna consciousness, and we lose enthusiasm because we just realize, oh, all that's ahead of me is old age and death, So, and we're not getting much from our spiritual life. So we hear a verse like this and it's, oh, wow, okay. So for that phase, it's important to take care of the matter around us. We're going to take care of our body. We're going to take care of our minds. We have to take care of our communities. We have to take, we have to take care of some things. In the new phase, we perform a lot of austerities, and we neglect our bodies and we neglect our families. Often people turn away from their families, their parents, and then, so in this middle phase, if you find yourself here, it actually is important to, one of the ways that you don't have these miseries is that you take care. You see a lot of people, they have to change their diets, and they reconcile with their families, and they start to deal with some of their stuff. And this is important. Otherwise things will just get way worse. And it's important, crucially, actually, so in this phase, in this middle phase, what's crucial is to water your bhakti lata with activities in Krishna consciousness that you like. This is very, very important. There is a lot of duty that we have to do, just maintaining our body and our mind, our relationships, etc. And there's a lot of spiritual duties that we have to do. But it's very, very important when one is surrounded by death and suffering and all these miseries. You need taste. You need the youth and beauty of Krishna and Krishna consciousness, because that's what Krishna is. He's ever youthful. He's ever full of beauty. He's ever full of taste and rasa and sweetness. And when we're surrounded by death and miseries in the material world, which we are, it's important to get the nourishment and to see and hear the beauty and the love and the sweetness of Krishna. So we need to apply our practices, but not just dutifully, but also sink a little deeper into those practices that you really like to do. Because this will give you this nourishment through these long years, these decades sometimes of what can seem like a slog. Don't there is magic and there is sweetness in these things that you have taste for that are related to Krishna, because this is the source of the sweetness and this beauty and this youth, because we're not our bodies and we are not our minds and we're not the material world and all of those things, but we can become, we can think that we are if we're not accessing the ever fresh nature of Krishna. And the best way to access it is that not just through duty, because sometimes you can chant a lot, and if you're not accessing with your heart, it can seem very dry. So, but there are services that you can access with your heart. There are ways of relating to Krishna and serving Krishna with your heart. So in this phase, it's very crucial to please do that. Otherwise, as these verse talks about this, the surrounding of the miseries that we have, it can be very dry and disheartening. So it is a long slog having a body and a mind in this world, but it can also be sweet, like a sweet dance, to deal with the material energy that's happening. So that is an important aspect for us to remember. And then when a more mature person who hears a verse like this, they know, they've seen the miseries and they've lived through them, but they're still here. And they're actually happy and enthusiastic because they're still here. And they have understood, and they are doing this dance, and they are accessing that sweetness of Krishna. So you'll see they still have happiness and enthusiasm. And I stay in Alachua and a lot of older Prabhupada disciples, and it's really some of them that you really see they have this. They're actually like young people. Yes, they've been through tremendous things, tremendous horrific things, but they have accessed Krishna and they are getting that nourishment, and they have their savor, which they put their real heart into. So to the mature people out there, we humbly ask you, please, us fools down below, please give us your gifts, help us through, we're absorbed in our material suffering. We have a long list of complaints. Please help us rise up to the light and the freshness of Krishna. Yeah. So I mentioned these three categories. Of course, they're categories within the categories, and it's all everything's nuanced. We all know that. But it's important to know who we are and where we are, so we can actually adjust accordingly. It's very, very important, this honest reflection of who we are is crucial, actually. It's part of self-realization. And sometimes what we see is not so nice, but an ugly truth, maybe the ugly truth is that I have no taste and I'm just using spirituality to bypass my issues. That may be the case, and it often is the case. But that truth, however ugly it is better than the sweetest illusion that actually, no, I'm an advanced devotee. Because you cannot solve your problem until you first acknowledge that it exists. And that acknowledgement is part of consciousness, it's part of awareness. Where am I? Where do I sit? And once you can deal with that, then you can start to face things. I know it's hard to face our reality. We've actually done a lot of repressing over the years. We've done a lot of posing. So if we've posed as something better and bigger than we are, as I know I've done for many, many years, and then you see, oh, the truth is actually I'm like this, it's very humiliating. And then we push it down and we repress these things because we don't want to deal with them. And so when that truth comes out, it's quite shocking. But the truth will out, the truth comes out. It always does. This life, next life, at some stage it has to. So it's better now than later. Because the later we wait, the more that that becomes toxic repression. and that toxicity makes us sick in our relationships. People can't deal with us because we're not being who we are. They know who we are, what they can see, but we're posing as something. So the relationships never really fit, as opposed to open and honest people. It's much easier. There's a lot of problems with repressing and posing. And then in this verse, death is the ultimate truth of where we're at, because all of this posing and everything just falls away, and you're left with, oh, here I am. What is my relationship with Krishna? I don't know. I have nothing. There's nothing. It's never really developed that. So death can be quite confusing and bewildering and shocking, and the truth, because it's the truth, and we haven't really acknowledged our truth and dealt with the reality. And death comes away kind of ruthlessly and just takes all the illusion away. Yeah. So death also wonderfully gives us perspective, because when somebody's dying, a lot of stuff just doesn't matter anymore. It's like, it just doesn't matter. We die. That thing that I was so concerned about, it doesn't matter. So it's also very, very helpful, this. So these false attachments that we didn't need or we thought were so valuable but were wrong about, death shows us that, and we have this perspective, and perspective is a very, very valuable thing, very, very valuable, because you see things as they are, and seeing things as they are is to take you out of illusion. So we see crucially this doesn't matter. So then you can ask yourself, if this doesn't matter, what does matter? What does matter to you? Because if you just take out one thing of this class, so this is very, very important, because what matters to you as a person is the key to your spiritual enthusiasm and your relationship with God and His creation. I'll just say that again. So what matters to you as an individual is a key to your spiritual enthusiasm, which you absolutely have to have. And it's a key to your relationship with God, with Krishna, with Nishinga, with whoever your specific, something that matters to you, which deity matters to you. It's important, and it's important. It helps your relationship, and it helps you with how do you relate to His creation, even as external energy. Because what matters to you is your offering. Krishna wants you, where everyone's unique, and everybody has a unique, what you offer is what nobody else can offer. And Krishna wants that specific thing, and He's going to also relate to you like nobody else. And this relationship of your uniqueness and Krishna reciprocating with that uniqueness is the whole ras of everything that we're doing. So what matters to you is your offering. So cultivate what matters to you. Cultivate it. Try and find a way to relate this, what matters to you, to Krishna, and so that you can create your relationship with Him through your individuality and through your heart, because this is your specific mood, and this specific mood personalizes your relationship. It's just very, very important to personalize this relationship. So like at Gita Nagari here, Dhruva and Parijata are not just wanting to offer a farm as an alternative lifestyle to devotees. They want to please their guru. This is very, very personal for them. This isn't just going through the motions. There's a heart here. It matters to them. And that's the larger perspective that they have. This is their big picture. This is their taste. They're doing it for someone. It's personalized. They grew, and they through Krishna. But so this personalizing our practices, whatever it is, whether you're cooking or chanting or farm saver or counseling, whatever you have, if you can find if you personalize these things that you do, whatever it is, and there's a very, very broad canvas of what this can be and how you can do it. Krishna is not limited, and sometimes we get a little limited about how we think we got to, well, it's got to be the chanting, it's got to be the reading, and there's actually a whole arrangement, and nobody is disqualified from offering what they want to Krishna. So when you cultivate this and you personalize this practice, you will actually have these heartfelt experiences, these moments, even just for a few seconds. Like I like to chant somewhat, and if I can chant 16 rounds, there'll only be a few seconds within that that'll actually be able to, for me, because I'm not a very advanced devotee, but even those small bits that I can just try, Krishna, this is my offering to you, please accept. It's not much, but it's what I have, please accept it. You can get these few seconds, and that is where your relationship starts to connect and grow. And what you're actually saying, Krishna, it matters to me to do this for you. So this is how you connecting. And then we're giving ourselves and our hearts in these small little moments. And these heartfelt moments that we will experience, because you do experience them, are the jewels that we mine, and you can live for decades off these little moments. You just need to get a few of these where you connect with Krishna, and they're very, very, very valuable. But you get it by personalizing it. We mustn't be impersonal, and we just like, well, I'm just gonna because the higher taste is not just determination and austerity. You get this higher taste through these heartfelt moments. That's what gives you that reciprocation in that relationship. Because you need this higher taste, because it's very hard through just determination and austerity to defeat a lower taste. A higher taste gives you a lower taste. So yeah, so this connecting, personalizing, finding what matters to you. And then just to kind of conclude here, the other issue is fear. So death, when we hear about death, it can be fearful, and when we see the miseries in the world, we can be fearful because we want to protect ourselves from suffering, and that's understandable. And so we look at the world and we get fearful, we look at death and we get fearful, and it's understandable. I really understand that. I feel it too. But the problem is fear makes us small, and you cannot live a small life because you cannot access. It takes great courage to love. It takes courage to love, and because you're risking not being reciprocated with. We're risking, it takes courage to be vulnerable because you're risking being hurt. It takes courage to be kind because you're risking of being taken advantage of. But a fearful, closed heart is not a life. I'm sorry, it's just not a life. You can't live like that. We have to risk, actually. The world is scary. I know the world really is scary, but that scariness comes from our misidentifications. We're actually safe. We're Krishna's children. We're eternal spirit souls that cannot die. So I know that can sound like theory, but I'm encouraging all of us to practice this fearlessness, that we're in good hands here. At some stage, you have to trust. You just have to trust. It's really part and parcel. We have to trust that we are part and parcel of God. And we have to surrender this grip of our control. I know what the control is. We're trying to protect ourselves, but we can't. You cannot. We have to surrender and give ourselves a little bit. We have to make these fearful leaps. We're full of fear, but we leap towards the positive, or we can't go forward if we're not making these leaps. Even in these leaps, we're going to be tested. It's not like you leap once and then it was fearful and scary, and then Krishna caught you in his loving arms and you'll never have to leap again. and often we do have to leap again. So, but fear is no way to live. Our solace will come from trusting Krishna. He's here with us. He's attentive and accessible to us. This is what the real spiritualist is. That in family life or not in family life, living in the city, living in the forest, in good health, in bad health, under good management, under bad management, in the summer or the winter, married or divorced, rich or poor, Democrat, Republican, pro-choice, pro-life. In all of these ways of the world that we find ourselves, all these conditional things, we have to, within that we find ourselves with our conditioning, we have to find our way to have some trust and some trust that Krishna is going to take care of us. That we are helpless children, but somehow we're in the Krishna's lap. Because in this surrender, if we can find a place to do that, this is actually how we create our deathlessness, and how we can lose our fear and actually have that happy life that we're hoping that we want, because people want to be happy. Thank you very much for listening. I hope if you got anything from that, please understand it's coming from my teachers that have helped me along the way, and any things that I've misspoken, please forgive me as being a conditioned soul. Thank you very much. Hari Hari Bol. I don't know if there are any questions or if you have to go on to your service. Yeah, and also wanted to thank you for my stay here. My wife and I had a wonderful time. Thank you very much.
Can I ask? Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly just thank you deeply. I'm actually tuning in from Raleigh, North Carolina, just spontaneously. Thanks to Sarvatma Prabhu sending notifications. And yeah, I really found the ways that you described the 3 levels of devotees very really nice and refreshing, and I've never heard it explained that way. And like I feel like it's almost even more relevant than what I've heard, in the scriptures. And so thank you. I just want to thank you for the class.
Thank you very much for your sweet words, Prabhuji.
That was Vinoda Kovida Prabhu, who actually used to live here in Gitanagari. It is, let me say that your class is very, how can you say, is a warning, is a kind warning for those of us who have been around for a long time and going through the motions. And all of a sudden, it is sobering to discover that after so many years, you've been going through the motions for such long period. I am barely now discovering that my spiritual strength comes from the struggle that I had, not from very good moments. And there were very few highlights that, yes, I hold on to them for dear life because they can maintain me. But in all these despondency and fear and everything else, I still find hope, which is, so let me read you something from Bilva Mangala Thakur, and I want you to comment about the issue of hope. Bilva Mangala Thakur in the Krishna Karnamrita says, I'm eagerly waiting to see that boy of Vrindavan whose bodily beauty is captivating the whole universe, whose eyes are always bounded by black eyebrows and expanded like lotus petals, who is always eagerly glancing over his devotees and therefore moving slightly here and there. So he's saying, I'm eagerly waiting. This is the hope of even the most advanced Vaishnava. So can you explain what is hope and how to utilize it to our advantage?
Yeah, I think it boils down to like an element of trust that we are actually what the scripture says, part and parcel of Krishna, and we have a relationship with him, and he's very, very kind. Because if you believe that he's kind and you believe that he's part of him and you believe that he's God, why wouldn't we have hope? Why wouldn't we have hope? And I think what the other thing I would just say is that it helps to be with people or try and get the association of hopeful people. Somehow I've trusted. I haven't. My trust doesn't seem to be based on my personal behavior. But somehow or other, I've trusted that Krishna's kind and he will protect and look after us. And I do feel that when I'm around people who have that trust, it really helps my trust. So I think there's a tremendous thing to be hopeful for. We can see also just pragmatically, you can't hope in the material world. I mean, if you just look at well-established senior devotees, they are happy. They're happier than other people that we know. So, and they're like that because of what they've done. So if we continue to do in the way that they are encouraging us, we should get there too. I think we have a lot to be hopeful for.
Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone else has a comment or a question? Otherwise, we'll end it here and go to the morning program. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, devotees.
I should probably say something. It always bothers me when class ends a little prematurely. I like to keep the nectar flowing, but I'd like to thank you for your class, Mukunda Prabhu. Presented some interesting perspectives, and what I particularly appreciated was your comments about heartfelt moments. Need to gather my thoughts here, but those heartfelt moments, I guess, really for myself are that really has, for me, become the focus and the central feature of my life. Circumstances of my life have changed significantly over the years. I'm mostly incapacitated and reaching the end of my life. And I'll tell you honestly that I'm hearing class day after day, and I listen to devotees describing all different kinds of ideas, points of view, perspectives, techniques to try to assist in the process of advancing. And for myself, and I appreciate how all of this is valuable to many individuals, and but we are all individuals, and for myself, I sometimes what I hear sounds to me to be, and it may simply be the fact that I'm a simple person, but sometimes I feel as though things are the process of Krishna consciousness is being overcomplicated. Some people are complex and they require a lot of substance to occupy their mind. I'm not one of them. I'm relatively simple, at least at this stage of my life, because I can literally die at any moment. And I've had to readjust my priorities significantly and reassess a great many things. And at this point, what it has come to is that I find that what is most important is just simply hearing it and chanting with attention, and as you say, with the understanding that Krishna is a person, that that it's a personal interaction, and that to me is very, very key. That has unlocked where the whole process of hearing and chanting comes alive when you understand that you're dealing with a person. So for myself, the process of Krishna consciousness has become quite simple. It's just a daily struggle to simply hear and chant attentively my humble offering to their divine lordships, trying to engage myself in the simple process of hearing and chanting. I don't know. I just felt compelled to share that, but your mention of those heartfelt moments struck a chord with me, because that really is what I cling to and live for at this stage of my life. I'm bedbound. I require supplemental oxygen to keep me alive. I am really just hanging on. So the circumstances of my life have become very, very simple in one respect. I've had to just drop all kinds of other types of engagements and just looking at what is most critical. So I find that I need to focus on just simply purifying my consciousness, preparing myself for the final test. You speak of pain and tests in life. And at this stage of my life, every day is a colossal test. I have to live with all kinds of chronic pain and tremendous amount of misery. Lots of tests are there, but and for so many years, I've been struggling in my practice of Krishna consciousness for 50 years. And in 50 years, you go through a lot of things, you see a lot of stuff. I've been through, feels like I've been through everything. And, but I'm still here, still slugging away at it. And for whatever it's worth, what has always proven to me to be the most critical thing, the most important thing, and the thing that has gotten me through all those years, and what I'm understanding more and more now to be the most essential of all of our practices, is just simply the chanting of Hare Krishna, which is our means of purification. Without that, it's very hard to progress. There's lots of things that we can do to occupy our time in devotional service, lots of ways to render devotional service, but in this age, hearing and chanting the holy names is most essential. My personal realization that others may have another. That's what I see at this point, and I don't know if that may be helpful to others, but heartfelt moments. I live for those heartfelt moments, and my effort every day is to make every moment a heartfelt moment. That's really my focus.
Well, I appreciate that. Actually, so what I got from what just happened there was that I gave a class, and it was going to end, and you felt some appreciation for what I'd done, and you wanted to try and reciprocate. So you made a comment, and that's actually that personalized connecting that I'm talking about. Like so already now our relationship between you and me, it's actually meaningful. So I appreciate that you just practically showed what I was talking about. And that obviously it's a small little thing, but in that consciousness, I mean, I felt that you were appreciating what I'd done, and you wanted to reciprocate me in a, this is how relationships start. So thank you for the practical example of how to have small little heartfelt kind moments. I appreciate it. And 50 years of service is extraordinary. And I am very, very hopeful for your continued progress in this, because you just demonstrated that you're sensitive and aware to devotees and devotee relationships and connecting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the class, and Tarka Prabhu for your comments, as well as Sarvat Prabhu. Yeah, I just feel compelled to share how I'm quite touched by this class. You spoke of so many things that deal directly with our authentic experience as a human being. And as human beings in this conditioned states, in this conditioned world, we often protect our hearts, or so-called protect our hearts.
Yeah.
And so when we feel fear or pain or broken trust and things like that, we put a wall around our hearts,
Mm-hmm.
Which impacts our associations and our processing of Krishna consciousness and Krishna working within our lives. And so you spoke of vulnerability, and what came to mind was the last verse in the Shikshastra. Even if you handle me roughly by your embrace, it may be brokenhearted by not being present before me. You'll always be my worshiper, Lord, unconditional. Unconditional. And so I'm appreciating how your class is opening my heart to recognize that more, that the process requires fearlessness to be able to embrace what Krishna is giving us, which is our eternal relationship. And it manifests through, I heard a class, Radhanath Swami was saying that 90% of our advancement in spiritual life is association. So to get Krishna, we have to embrace his devotees and the experiences that we have, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, and still love him unconditionally. So I just want to say thank you for this class. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, it's not easy to be fearless, and we do want to protect ourselves, but how can we? It's very difficult. It's a matter of trust as well. It's a matter of trust.
who is a poet that said it's better to have loved than lost than to never have loved.
I don't know, but I have heard that, and I agree.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Just wanted to
Hare-
say thank you very much for your class. I have a comment. Do you know Bali Maharaj who lived here in Gitanagari?
I personally don't know. No, this is actually my first visit here.
Okay, well, I wanted to bring him up because it's a very special devotee, disciple of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, senior brahmachari who lived in Gitanagari for years, and he actually passed away in February. I think it was February. So really, when you were talking about death in the class and kind of the material attachments and, you know, just how they kind of, things you thought were important are less very clear in your mind because, you know, the dying process is taking place. I was thinking about, you know, all of our experience in Gitanagari when Bali Maharaj was in hospice and was, you know, leaving his body. And he was in a room in a cabin, and, you know, we would go visit him. And it was just like, I was aware how that was so prominent in the consciousness, just like, okay, he's going to be passing on. And that was kind of like a more prominent than other, like, sort of like things you think about. So it kind of, like you said, it brings that, like, if I understood you correctly, that importance to, you know, leaving your body. And so I just wanted to bring that up if anybody, I don't know if anybody had more nectar to share on that. And also I wanted to share that something he used to say a lot, because we were, I think Uncle Tarka Prabhu was talking about how Krishna is a person, and Uncle Bali used to always, Bali Maharaj Prabhu, he always used to say, like, he always used to, like, you know, kind of have these like one-liners he would, like, sing and say when he walked around or saw you, and he'd be like, yes, you know, Krishna he's non-different than his name, you know, the holy name is non-different than Krishna, and Krishna is absolute, you know, he's non-different from his name. And he's like, he's always saying, like, chant the holy names of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna, of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. And you know, he just had, so I just, yeah, that's something I thought of. And I'm very grateful for all the sharing and your powerful class today. And yeah, I can't remember the third thing I wanted to share. Just thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you, devotees.
Thank you for appreciating. Yeah, death's intense. It's a huge thing. It's like the fundamental element of being in the material world, that everything has to die. It's like the one huge major difference. But it's very, very valuable. Gosh, it's so valuable because it brings out truth. I wish, yeah. I mean, we're very fortunate to have the process because we really know how to deal with that, with death, a lot better than most people.
Yes. I'm thinking of the phrase "die before dying" that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj talked about. There was a class yesterday, yeah, on that topic.
Yeah. Because it'll help you understand what's invaluable to you. There's so many external ridiculous things that occupy us. But if you took that away and you see what's left, that's actually crucial, because we're a personal movement. It's really one of our distinguishing characters, personalism. And you got to know you're part of that. And that's what death will help, because we're not our bodies, we're not our mind, we're not our conditioning, and all of those things, well, the body goes, you know, and then the material attachments at that stage are going to go too. So you are left with a more illuminating truth of who you are. So we should try and do that. I actually personally, I have 3 planets in the 12th house, which is the house of death, the last house. Somehow or other, I'm always picturing myself on my deathbed with, you know, you see the sunken cheeks and the mouth's open, and someone's it's helpful. Like, we're going to be there. Every single person in some stage, you're going to be there. and you're going to have lived a life. And what do you want to feel when you're there? To be filled with regrets, or I mean, that's just one other thing I'll just mention, because it seems that people wanted to continue a little bit. But if you have some unresolved relationships, or you have some people that you don't speak to, or some problems, try and get those resolved now, because you don't want to have that stuff when you're dying. You know, if you need to pick up the phone and say sorry to somebody, just do it. I know it's humbling, but it will clear out the heart. All of these things, these complaints and problems in the heart, it really makes death hard. You know, just make your peaces, say your sorries, even if you don't feel that you were wrong. Just don't hold this stuff in your heart. It's really going to make death difficult. You know, just be kind and forgiving. I always say that I don't want justice in the world. I want mercy, because justice means that everything I've done wrong, I have to get punished for. So we shouldn't be going to seek justice on everybody else as well, because if that justice is our mood, fine, but then it has to come back on us too. Rather be agents of mercy, so that when we come and all of our faults get revealed, we get the mercy program and not the justice program. So we can practice some of that mercy by just, you know, clearing up some relationship issues that we have. Even if you're a young person, you're 25 and you've got something that's personal, this friend or the ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, whatever, you just cleanly, or the parents, or you can just apologize. A letter, or even if you're not ready, that you can start praying in your heart, please can this go? Please can this go? Because those are blocks that access the sweet moments. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're challenging us to be fearless in our progression in Krishna consciousness, to embrace others, embrace ourselves, clean the heart. We can't, take those off in the margin.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I don't want you to suffer, and I don't want to suffer, and that just all means suffering. I have such a little tolerance for suffering personally, but your intelligence shows you, like, you got to do the things that are not going to cause you to suffer, and being fearful or protective, it's just not going to help. We want love. I have a lot of passion, and I want love. I kind of demand it. I want to be nourished. I want to be full. I want to be happy. But to do that, you got to do some things, and being harsh with others, or even just being cleanly on a justice way with them, it's not right. We've got to be merciful. It just is going to make us happier. It just is going to make us happier. And it does require some boldness. But if our shastras will guide us that we're acting not in crazy ways where we're risking unnecessarily, we're risking the right way. The leap, we are being encouraged to leap, which can seem reckless, to leap off cliffs. But we're being encouraged by intelligent, sober, kind, wonderful people. So we can trust, these people are all saying these kinds of things. I haven't said anything new that you all haven't heard before, but somehow we're fearful, and we take a lot of, the news is just that there's a saying, if it bleeds, it leads. In other words, if there's suffering or in the news, that's going to lead, because people have a taste, or somehow the mind likes that. So we get a lot of that fearful mood from the world, so which is not conducive to the open-hearted vulnerability that we kind of need to access Krishna's love and the love of the devotees, and the sweetness of relationships. Like I'll just say a bit more. So I've been married for 20 years, or 20 years. To really you know, you can get a lot of love from your partner. You can, but you also have to do some vulnerability, some apologizing, some growth. And so the love that's available in a partner, a lot of us, we don't access it because of our own pride, our own ego, our own stuff. So we're missing out. And I found that the more that I've been able to grow and open and be vulnerable and all those things, the more I'm getting from my relationship. It's a little embarrassing or a little humiliating or a little vulnerable, but we also know that this is the right way to do these things. So the thing is, I'm a pleasure seeker, and that's how you get your pleasure. It's just not so cheap. A lot of us want a very expensive thing and we don't want to pay anything. So this vulnerability and this fearlessness and this trust in Krishna is kind of what you have to pay a little bit. But Krishna is so kind. It's really, we have to give so little. We get so much back. But also I understand most of us, we're broken people, broken little boys and girls just wanting someone to love us and afraid to make the littlest of step. And Krishna understands that. He's very kind, he's very patient, you know. Yeah, trust is a big thing. Trust is a big thing. We only really trust ourselves, and we are so faulty and conditioned. It's a pity. Yeah. Ultimately, there's really a lot of room here to be positive and trusting. We're aligned with really good people, a really good process, a kind God, you know. You'll see more and more people are really getting more and more broken, more and more afraid, more and more hurt. The hearts are closing and getting smaller and smaller. It's you have to fight against that. Yeah.
Yesterday I heard, or a few days ago, that to be humble and to be able to access that humility, one way is, you know, through humiliation. And I know
Through
you just
humiliation.
mentioned, yeah, and I know you just mentioned humiliation, that you can kind of feel embarrassment or humiliation when you're vulnerable in a relationship, but you get a lot out of it, the love in the relationship, through, I guess, like the vulnerability point that Jagannath Pandit Prabhu just put in the chat, and the fearlessness. And the interesting thing is, I believe it was Radhanath Swami who said that sacrifice is to make things sacred. That's the definition. And that changes your conception of sacrifice, because sometimes it sounds like something you don't want to do, but really, when you think about that, it makes it something sacred that kind of makes it desirous to sacrifice, and, you know, sacrifice and maybe your fearlessness, or your fearfulness, or your ego, or your false ego, or, you know.
Yeah. We were previously reading, I gave class a couple of months ago. Savatma asked me, we're reading about Daksha and Shiva and Daksha's humiliation. He took a head of a goat, but it helped him. He went from a very proud person to, you know, offering these beautiful, heartfelt prayers. So it's true. I mean, I try and avoid humiliation, as we all do, but it seems to be a very good teacher, because the ego, I see that in myself a lot, how my false ego really stops progress, and it's so strong and prominent. And then when it gets broken a little bit through humiliation, it's progress. The false ego becomes more of the real ego as the humble, you know, we can be confident, you know, but we are humble. We're humble. Yeah. And that can sound fearful. Like a lot of the process, I get scared, frankly, like, you know, the purification and the humbling that comes and the humiliation that comes, and these are the medicines that help us. But unfortunately, living the other way is worse. So yes, it's a little scary, but living the other way is worse. So just practically, we can see for happiness, we got to go this way. Just to encourage myself and all of us, this helps. It's better. You know, the other stuff is going to cause just more suffering, more toxicity, more repression, more posing, you know. Yeah. So we kind of, we gleefully go ahead, knowing there may be many things around the corner, but we trust. We like little children, you know, we little children. Sometimes I think to know everything about the material world is just too horrific. You need a level of ignorance to just get out of bed, you know, about how heavy this place can be. But on the counter side of that, we really have to have a little faith in our scriptures and our process. We you know, otherwise it's going to be impossible to live. So to live a little bit in the trust and the faith of what we're hearing, you know, I think it's good. We'll practically experience our growing of our faith by living like this, and we do practically experience it. And our faith grows from these little leaps to the bigger leaps, and then, you know, to jumping off the cliffs.
I have a question. So Rama Prabhu was discussing hopefulness earlier, and yeah, I was just thinking about that and how yeah, it's easy to be hopeless or discouraged,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, and then when I heard the discussion of hopefulness, sometimes, you know, it's easy to just flip like, oh yeah, you know, feel enthusiastic. And I'm curious about how sometimes when you when you can become sober about a situation, it can kind of make you, you know, feel less of that enthusiastic energy. But then when someone's like, oh yeah, be hopeful, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'll be hopeful. But I was curious about how where that gets into like a naivete.
Yeah, yeah. Well, patience is a key element of hopefulness. In other words, time. Because what happens if we're impatient, we're hopeful that it's going to come and everything's going to be fine, and then 1 week, and then a month, and then eventually we're kind of, hopefulness is actually patience that it will all play out in the time it's meant to play out, when it's meant to play out. And it's part of also acceptance of things that are playing out are actually fine. We're just misunderstanding and of how these things are playing out. So patience is a very important part of this, to let trust and patience, you know, that what is happening is actually, we have enough, we are just looking at things the wrong way. Things will play out for us, so the patience is there. That'll take away some of the, you know, that like positive thinking, you know, if not properly applied, can lead to people becoming cynical afterwards. But so if you add some patience to it, and your hope, what are you hopeful for? Also trying to understand, like, that I'm going to be in ecstasy dancing up and, you know, around on the material world. It's you know, the body's the body. Prabhupada die, people don't die, you know, the bodies die. It's just it helps to understand an understanding of where we're at. And like, so I'm going to die. That, how do I be positive about that? But I understand, because of my knowledge, that, you know, I'm not the soul. I mean, I'm not the body, so I'm the soul. So that can give you hope that I'm not ended. So knowledge helps, patience helps, and trust helps. That will give us the hope, you know. So it doesn't have to become just some mental thing that we just like cranking on the, oh, I'm going to be positive and hopeful now. We understand why we can be positive, you know. We have the patience to let things play out in their time. We're not trying to control. So that's how we can have sustained hope, through patience and knowledge.
My personal thoughts on hopefulness are that for myself, I guess, my sense of hopefulness comes from my understanding of the personality of Krishna. Heard about the character of Krishna, the more I understand of Krishna's personality, the more I feel hopeful that my practical experience of Krishna's kindness, the experience of the kindness of Krishna's devotees, Krishna's pure devotee, that gives me a sense of hopefulness. Otherwise, I personally find no source of hopefulness actually anywhere else. I don't find any source of hopefulness anywhere in the material nature. I have actually a great sense of pessimism about material existence, every aspect of it. My sense of hopefulness comes really exclusively from my understanding of Krishna's character and my practical experience of his kindness. That's just my personal experience for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I think it's the right place to put hope. We're spirit souls, so the hope, the matter is temporary, and it's no place to put any hope in matter. We still have to live here though, and we still have bodies and minds that we need to deal with. So, but we need to understand their limitations. And so in one sense, material is hopeless because the body dies. Nobody's body doesn't die. But we know, again with knowledge, that we are souls which cannot die. So that's hope. And it's true. But it's parallel. You have to deal with the material because your material can disturb your spiritual if you're not spiritually advanced enough. Ill health can really be a problem for your practices. But the more advanced person can be at a point where they can absorb themselves spiritually regardless of what's happening materially. And I often pray for that, is for personally to have my spiritual foundation not so reliant on what's happening externally, because externally is such a mess and so much up and down, good and bad, hot and cold. And particularly at the end of life, one sees how it's all just negative materially because the body's dying and everything's going. So yeah, our hope is spiritual, but we do need to deal with the material while we're here. And also, just our hope being spiritual, we're incredible. We're part of Krishna. It's extraordinary. We're unlimited. We're full of Ananda. Like, is this all just lies and this stuff? And somehow we're just, not really always are true. So it's wonderful. And not only do we have to reach that, we are that already. I think it was the wisdom of the sages, they coined the term the pure soul theology. We are a pure soul. This is what we are. We have to reach up to that. So that's our nature. So that's why we have hope. We don't even need hope. It is. We just have to slowly move the misidentifications with the wrong stuff. So we're the most hopeful and the most positive, Like even with the bodies, like we know they're going to die, but still we take care. We have a vegetarian diet. We have good sattvic programs. We're positive about the body. We're going to look after it and use it nicely. We have much to be hopeful for. We just need to have the knowledge so we know where to put our energies. I personally don't. I know the world is scary and difficult, but we really have juice here to really give us that spark. I mean, that spark and that hope and that nourishment of the heart and that bright face and that happiness and that love and affection, that's definitely there for us. So if we're not feeling that, of course, there are times that we should try and look for it, because it shouldn't be a dry slog, not what we're doing. There will be periods of difficulty. You know, like you can have astrological periods for 20 years of a debilitating thing where nothing is going to work. So you also have to, it's just to understand the mess that's here, but not overly identify with it. So even in bad, terrible times, one can still be okay. We don't have to have ecstasy all the time, because this is this patience thing, this large time span of a soul playing around in the material world. It's long and large, you know, and there's much time here. So not everything is going to be joy, bliss, nectar, but even in the terrible times, we'll be able to find solace. So that perspective that we need to have is helpful, so that when we hear, oh, we should be hopeful, we should be positive, I'm going through a terrible time and there's nothing I can do about it, have some patience that that will pass, and that it's okay that not everything's joy, bliss, nectar during those periods. That's that talking about those mature devotees. They've seen it. They've been through 20-year cycles of negativity and come out the other side. But when you're like year 3 in a negative cycle of 20 years, all you know is this just future looks like suffering. So that's why you can try and step back and get the broader perspective of it all. You know, that's one of our limitations here. It's hard for us to get the real big picture. Even in one life, it's like hard to know what it's like going to be old, let alone we've been old so many times. So this broadening out, like that, imagining your death, like what's actually valuable, and like, okay, I'm going to take another life and another relationship and another wife and more kids, you know, and more jobs and more. So just try and pull out, but underneath it, there's that spark where we are, and the more emphasis and concentration on that, the more we will get that perspective and the patience to help us get through all of this with some positivity. Because Satchidananda Swami mentioned once in a talk, we know that all the verse, all the while tolerating our past misgivings, you know, and knowing that the kingdom of God is our rightful claim. So that tolerating is not just like a donkey that's getting beaten and just walk around tolerating, because that can be, that verse has always been a little difficult for me to swallow, that we just tolerate. But the positive of that is that we actually understanding that what's happening to us, even in the negative, is actually benevolent and kindness. That's the faith part that's a little difficult, that we have to theoretically practice at some stage when you're in the midst of it. But if you can actually see the benevolent force behind the reversals, then there is nothing that will not make you unhappy. But that's at some stages a practice to understand that this cancer, this divorce, this etc., is sometimes a benevolent force for us. And that requires some study and some discussion and some practice and some prayerful mood, because, you know, these things are subtle and nuanced. But I definitely would like to try and see a little more the benevolence behind the reversals, because I do feel that that's a key to actually being a very happy person. Because you can't escape those reversals, and they're gonna come materially. Yes, that's the verse, Jagannath Pandit Prabhu.
I'll just fill in the dead air here. Speak about times of how do I put this? Spoke about how it's not necessarily ecstasy all the time, that sometimes we can go through relatively dry periods. And having been through many dry periods, I have taken a lot of time to analyze, because I don't care for them. I regard them as I guess, a problem that needs to be fixed. So because our taste in Krishna consciousness is what we depend upon for everything. In order to progress, we require a higher taste. The cultivation of that higher taste is a central focus of my life. And in my own life, what I have found is that my biggest obstacle to that higher taste is offenses, various types of offenses, and particularly offenses towards Vaishnavas. Actually, any instance in which the dryness in my Krishna consciousness has always been associated with offenses committed. That never fails to pull the rug out from under me. And so for myself, that has been focus, trying to eliminate my offenses in order to ensure that my taste is not spoiled and that I can progress constructively.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic, but I completely agree 100%. If there's one sure way to kill any potential for happiness, is to be offensive to the devotees. Please, dear devotees, just don't gossip about other devotees. Don't gossip about anybody. Please resist any urge to be critical, even if it's valid. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Gossip, the movement gets killed, will get killed by the internal and not the external. But it's very, very important. Please pray for each other that we don't do that. It will just kill everything.
I always thought that there was hope for me, because there was another devotee on whom I focused that I thought he was more offensive than me. So as long as he didn't, as long as he was okay, I felt safe. But he died, so I'm in hot water now.
It's time to get out of that hot water. Take a cold shower.
All right, so I've kept you all, so thank you. I appreciate it. It's such a nice community here.
We are fortunate to have you here, and hope that you come back, whether for a visit or for good, if you're so inclined. And Radha Damodar will kidnap you. I know they have the power to do that.
Thank you.